5 Ways Video Games Secretly Save the World. Number 5. World of Warcraft Fights Disease. Launched in 2004, the online role-playing game World of Warcraft is quite possibly the most famous game ever made, putting its millions of players into the pointy shoes of adventurers in the world of Azeroth. WoW provides a much-needed escape from the hassles of everyday life. Most of the time. In September of 2005, a virtual virus began to spread through the game's online population. Called Corrupted Blood, the illness was intended only to strike the strongest of characters, who old NFT have been overly inconvenienced. Due to a programming error, however, the disease was able to jump to anyone near the infected, including super weak new characters who were killed nearly instantly. The virus spread and quickly grew to epidemic proportions, with people fleeing the cities and quarantines being established. And it could not have worked out any better. Real-world epidemiologists caught wind of the incident and used it as a model to study the spread of disease. Apparently, despite sophisticated mathematical models based on past epidemics, tracking pandemic disease is pretty hard. It is impossible to replicate the unpredictable human element in traditional models, but not here. In WoW's virtual disease lab, humans were in control of the characters, ignoring quarantines to assist the infected, fleeing to other cities, or just wandering through plague zones out of curiosity. The crisis provided invaluable data on the epidemic phenomenon, and even appeared in a few academic papers on the subject. Number 4. Online gaming saves the economy. Many online games, like World of Warcraft, EVE Online, and Second Life have massive, sophisticated economies. Players work for currency by killing monsters and completing objectives and then spend that money in virtual shops. That work means that players aren't NFT likely to just throw their money around. It represents their time and effort, and they therefore tend to be pretty careful with it. This is why economists like video games. These games are the perfect models for testing new economic concepts. They are full of real people spending money that may as well be real. But there aren't any real consequences if the experiment fails. That sort of large-scale testing is simply too risky to attempt in the real world. It's for this reason that many economists have turned to online games to simulate their theories, tweaking and smoothing them out in the safety of a virtual world. This has removed an economic roadblock that's been in place since the 1960s. Paving the way for a more perfect financial system. So when your bank does NFT collapse in 20 years, be sure to remember the millions of gamers plugging away in front of their computer screens. Number 3. Multiplayer games train the leaders of tomorrow. Human beings are social creatures. For the most part, we find something more enjoyable if it has some sort of social element. This is where online multiplayer games come in, allowing gamers to come together and share their favorite pastime. Of course, human beings can also be a pretty hostile lot, requiring a strong leader to unify the group. And it's this demand that's cranking out the CEOs of the future. Whether it's a guild in World of Warcraft or a corporation in EVE Online, it needs a capable leader. These guys have to be able to coordinate the actions of sometimes thousands of players, mediate disputes, and motivate the members, all while ensuring that everyone is still having fun. It is a game, after all. These demands aren't so different from those faced by real-world business leaders, and people like Trey Radcliffe, founder of John Galt Games, know that firsthand. After soaking up his share of business knowledge in EVE, he started his own video game company. And he's not the only one that recognizes these games' training potential. An article in the Harvard Business Review described the leadership abilities honed by online games as crucial to the future of business. So maybe take it easy on your raid leader, he may actually be your boss someday. Number 2. Military games save lives on the battlefield. The word simulator gets thrown around a lot in the video game industry. More often than not, that just means the game ends up involving a lot of tedious numbers, but not always. A very special set of games developed by the U.S. military creates an ultra-realistic simulation of real-world combat scenarios, and is used to prepare soldiers for the field. Pouring $50 million into the project, the U.S. Army obviously needs no convincing of the perks of gaming. Patching together elements with military training potential from the most popular commercial games, these simulators have been carefully designed to provide recruits with some much-needed experience. One sim involves preparing soldiers for the very real possibility of a roadside ambush, providing them with life-saving instructions for dealing with an insanely deadly situation. Over 3,000 copies of just this one game have been produced and distributed to every branch of the military. Honestly, IFD kind of like a copy too. Number 1. The Nintendo Wiis Physical Therapy. Every once in a while, a game company will decide that what people want to do with their downtime is exercise. They are wrong. But despite these fitness games have typically atrocious sales, a new movement-based gaming device will come along a few years later, fading out just as quickly. Sometimes though, one of these inventions will escape this sedentary cycle and stick around for one reason or another. Like the Wiis. When released in 2006, this movement-sensing console was reasonably popular, but eventually everyone realized that standing to play games was kind of unnecessary and uncomfortable. It lagged behind the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 for years, but not in the offices of physical therapists. It was quickly discovered that the repetitive and sometimes strenuous actions demanded by the machine made it perfect for the rehabilitation of patients recovering from injuries like strokes and broken bones. The advantage of this rehabilitation was that it removed the tedium of more conventional therapy techniques and kept the mind off of any discomfort. The result was that patients found themselves completing their therapy, and therefore their recovery, much more quickly. That's all well and good, but the Wiis still has millions of broken TVs to answer for.